The Shardline Nebula looked less like a battleground and more like a vivid, open wound in the fabric of space. Clouds of ionized gas, glowing with a bruised purple and violent orange hue, swirled around the wreckage of 3 separate armadas. This was the graveyard of the sector, a place where sensors ghosted and targeting computers failed, leaving the outcome of the war to the raw instinct of commanders. Commander Cale Rourke stood on the bridge of the heavy cruiser Ironclad, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the tactical display with eyes that felt lined with sand. He had been awake for 50 hours. The war against the Aurolith Empire had lasted for 6 years. But the last 6 hours had been the bloodiest. The Aurolith ships were beautiful monstrosities. They were teardrop-shaped vessels of gold and white ceramic, glowing with internal luminescence, moving with the grace of aquatic predators. They possessed superior shielding and superior firepower. By all conventional metrics, Cale and his ragged fleet of gray, scarred human destroyers should have been vaporized 10 minutes ago. But Cale Rourke did not fight by conventional metrics. "Report," Cale said, his voice a low gravel that cut through the bridge chatter. Lieutenant Corinne, his tactical officer, did not look up from her console. Her fingers flew across the haptic interface. "Gravity well generators are holding at 90% capacity," she said. "The enemy flagship, the Sunpiercer, is drifting into the trap. They are trying to correct their course, but the nebula's interference is masking our drone signals. They think the gravity pull is a natural anomaly." Cale nodded. It was an insane gamble. He had ordered his engineering teams to rig the drone fleet with localized gravity well projectors, essentially creating artificial invisible sinkholes in space. He was not trying to outgun the Aurolith, he was trying to drown them. "Fire the kinetic drivers," Cale ordered. "Target the asteroids in Sector 4. Do not hit their ships. Hit the rocks behind them." The crew hesitated for a fraction of a second. It went against every instinct to fire at debris rather than the enemy firing at you. But they obeyed. The Ironclad shuddered as the massive magnetic rails running the length of its spine discharged. In the void, 12 massive tungsten slugs slammed into a cluster of unstable asteroids floating behind the Aurolith formation. The impact shattered the rock, sending a shotgun spray of high-velocity shrapnel cascading into the rear engines of the enemy fleet. At the same moment, Cale signaled the drones. The gravity wells activated. The golden Aurolith ships, trying to evade the rock spray, swerved directly into the gravity pockets. Their engines whined and flared, caught in the invisible undertow. Momentum turned against them. The formations broke. Ships collided with a silence that was terrifying to witness on the view screen. The great golden whales of the void were thrashing, helpless against physics. "Prepare the final volley," Cale said. "Target their propulsion drives. We end this now." He expected the final desperate returning fire. He expected the scream of boarding pods or the flare of a self-destruct sequence. The Aurolith were aristocrats, obsessed with honor and aesthetic perfection. They did not lose ugly. But the fire never came. "Commander," Corinne said, her voice spiking with confusion. "I am receiving a transmission, wideband, unencrypted. It is from the Sunpiercer. Put it on speakers," Cale said. The bridge fell silent. The static hissed for a second, clearing into a voice that was melodious, synthesized, and calm. "This is Aurolith High Command. We formally surrender. All units are powering down weapons. We submit to the authority of the Terran Coalition. Cease fire. Repeat, cease fire." Cale narrowed his eyes. He watched the tactical map. The golden icons were turning from red to blue. Their shields dropped. Their engines went dark. It was too fast. It was too clean. 6 years of brutal attrition. of trench warfare across a dozen star systems, and they gave up because of one clever gravity maneuver? It did not make sense. The Orolith had enough firepower left to take half of Kale's fleet with them to hell. Scan them, Kale said. Check for thermal buildups. Check for bioweapons. This feels wrong. It is clean. Sir, the sensor officer replied. They are venting their plasma reserves. They are dead in the water. We have won. A cheer started to rise from the back of the bridge, the relief of men and women who thought they were going to die today. Kyle raised a hand, silencing it instantly. Maintain alert status, he said. No one celebrates until we are in dry dock. He walked to the communication station, leaning over the console. Any other signals? Kale asked. Just the surrender loop. Sir, the comms officer said. Wait. The officer frowned, pressing a headset deeper against one ear. I am picking up a ghost signal, the officer said. Very faint. Low frequency. It is not on the military band. It is coming from the moon of the fourth planet, the one inside the ion storm belt. Let me hear it, Kyle said. The audio shifted. Through the crackle of cosmic radiation, a rhythmic pulsing sound emerged. It was not a standard SOS. It was a heartbeat code, a specific pattern used by high-value diplomatic transports. That is a royal transponder, Kale whispered. He looked at the main screen. The moon in question was a jagged rock scarred by perpetual electrical storms. If a ship had gone down there, the survival rate was near zero. Is it the Orolith Admiral? Corinne asked. Is that why they surrendered? Their commander crashed? Maybe, Kale said, or maybe it is the bait for the trap I have been waiting for. He made a decision. He could not leave a potential high-value target behind, nor could he ignore a piece of the puzzle that might explain this impossible victory. Lieutenant Corinne, you have the bridge, Kale said, turning toward the lift. Keep the guns trained on the sun piercer. If they so much as blink, vaporize them. I am taking a Raptor team down to that moon. Sir, that is against protocol, Corinne argued. You are the fleet commander. Kale stopped at the doors. We just won a war that we should have lost. Lieutenant, protocol died about 10 minutes ago. The descent to the moon was violent. The Raptor dropship shook like a tin can inside a washing machine as it punched through the ionosphere. Lightning, thick and purple, lashed against the hull. Kyle sat strapped into the pilot seat, his hands fighting the controls. Behind him sat 4 of his best extraction specialists, armored in matte black environmental suits. They were silent, professionals who knew that if the crash did not kill them, the atmosphere might. Touchdown in 30 seconds. Kale announced over the comms. The gravity down there is unstable. Watch your step. The pockets will invert your weight if you are not careful. The Raptor slammed onto a plateau of obsidian rock, the landing claws digging deep to anchor against the wind. The ramp hissed open, revealing a landscape that looked like a hallucination. The moon was a garden of glass. Huge crystalline structures that resembled trees grew out of the rock, glowing with a faint, internal blue light. The wind howled through them, creating a sound like 1,000 flutes played by a madman. The air was breathable but tasted of ozone and copper. Kyle grabbed his rifle and stepped out. He checked his wrist computer. The signal was strong, coming from a ravine about 500 meters north. Stay sharp, Kyle said. Formation 2. They moved through the crystal forest. The physics of the place were nauseating. One moment, Kale felt his boots heavy on the rock. The next, he felt light as a feather, his stomach dropping as a gravity pocket tried to lift him into the sky. They had to use magnetic grapples to stay grounded. We have contact, the point man, Sergeant Miller said. visual on a crash site. They crested a ridge and looked down. A small, sleek vessel lay broken at the bottom of the ravine. It was unmistakably Royal Aurolith design, white gold, curved lines, no sharp angles. It had been torn open, not by the crash but by weapons fire. "Wait," Cale said, holding up a fist. "Look." Movement flickered near the wreckage. There were figures down there, soldiers. They wore the golden armor of the Aurolith Imperial Guard. "They are searching for survivors?" Miller asked. "No," Kyle said, watching through his scope. "They are not searching. They are hunting." He zoomed in. The Aurolith soldiers were moving with weapons raised, scanning the debris with lethal intent. In the center of the wreckage, huddled against a piece of burning hull, was a solitary figure. Even from this distance, and through the smoke, she was breathtaking. She wore ceremonial combat silk, a flowing fabric that shimmered like pearl, now stained with grime and blood. Her helmet was gone, revealing long, silver hair that whipped in the wind. She was holding a broken energy pistol, pointing it at her own soldiers. "That is a VIP," Cale said. "Why are her own men engaging her?" As he watched, one of the Aurolith soldiers lunged. The woman fired, but her weapon sparked and died. The soldier raised a heavy rifle, aiming for her head. It was an execution. "Engage," Kyle shouted. "Weapons free." The human team opened fire from the ridge. Their kinetic rounds slammed into the ravine, sparking off the golden armor of the Aurolith soldiers. The sudden ambush caused chaos. The Aurolith turned, confused by the attack from above. Cale did not wait. He activated his jump jets, leaping from the ridge and diving into the ravine. He landed hard, rolling to absorb the impact, and came up firing. He put 2 rounds into the chest plate of the soldier closest to the woman. The shock rounds were non-lethal but paralyzed the nervous system. The alien soldier convulsed and dropped. "Secure the perimeter." Kyle ordered his team as they rappelled down behind him. He sprinted toward the woman. She flinched as he approached, raising her empty pistol as a bludgeon. Her eyes were wide, glowing with the bioluminescence typical of her species. But they were filled with terror and defiance. "Do not touch me, Terran," she hissed. Her voice was weak, strained by pain. Kyle stopped 3 feet from her, raising his hands. "I am not going to hurt you," he said. "Look at them. They were trying to kill you. I just stopped them." She looked past him at the paralyzed Aurolith guards, then back at Cale. The adrenaline that had been holding her up seemed to vanish. She slumped against the wreckage. Cale moved in. He saw the wound now. It was on her side, a jagged tear through the silk armor. But it was not bleeding red. It was not bleeding gold. The wound was flickering with a black, static-like energy, a corruption that seemed to be eating the flesh. Kyle had seen every weapon used in this war. He had never seen this. It looked like the space between stars had been injected into her veins. "Medical!" Cale shouted. "Get over here!" He looked at her face. Despite the grime, he recognized the sharp, aristocratic cheekbones, the markings on her forehead that denoted high lineage. He had seen her face on intelligence briefings. "Princess Seraphine Vielle," Cale said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "You are the heir to the Aurolith throne." Seraphine looked at him, her vision unfocused. "The storm," she whispered. "It is coming." Thunder cracked overhead, louder than before. The ion storm was intensifying. Lightning struck a crystal tree nearby, shattering it into a million glowing shards. "Commander," Miller yelled over the wind, "we cannot stay here. The storm is going to fry the electronics on the Raptor if we do not leave in 3 minutes. Cale looked at the paralyzed Aurolith soldiers, then at the princess. She was fading fast. If he left her, the storm would kill her. or her own people would wake up and finish the job. If he took her, he was kidnapping the most important political figure in the enemy empire. He made the choice instantly. He holstered his weapon and knelt. Without asking for permission, he slid one arm under her legs and the other behind her back. She was surprisingly light, her bone density lower than a human's. "Hold on," he said. He lifted her, her head lolled against his chest, her silver hair spilling over his tactical rig. For a moment, the war stopped. The noise of the wind and the shouting of his men faded into the background. There was just the surreal image of a human commander, in dirty gray armor, holding the golden child of his enemy in the middle of a crystal forest. Cale looked at Miller, who was staring at him with his mouth slightly open. "I carried the wounded enemy princess home," Cale said, his voice loud and filled with a strange, incredulous laughter. "Her army had already surrendered to me." Miller blinked. "Sir, move," Cale barked, snapping back to reality. "Get back to the ship." He ran. The gravity pockets pulled at his legs, trying to drag him down, but he powered through, clutching Seraphine tight. The black static in her wound crackled against his armor, sending phantom shocks through his arm. They scrambled up the ramp of the Raptor just as the sky opened up. Hail the size of fists began to pound the hull. Kyle strapped Seraphine into the crash seat next to him. "Get us out of here," he yelled. The Raptor blasted off, fighting the gale, punching back through the clouds toward the safety of the void. The return to the ironclad was a blur of organized chaos. When the Raptor touched down in the hangar bay, the medical teams were already waiting. Kyle carried her out himself. He refused the stretcher. He walked through the corridors of his ship, ignoring the stares of his crew. The sight of the enemy princess, the symbol of the empire they had hated for 6 years, lying broken in their commander's arms, silenced the entire deck. He reached the medical bay. "Secure Suite 4, Kyle ordered. "High-level containment protocols. No one enters without my direct authorization." Dr. Aris, the ship's chief medical officer, took charge. She motioned for the nurses to take Seraphine, transferring her to a bio bed. "Careful with that wound," Cale warned. "It is active. I do not know what it is." As the nurses began to hook up the monitors, the doors to the medical bay hissed open. A man in a crisp, unsoiled uniform walked in. It was Director Holloway, the political liaison from the Terran Senate. "Commander Rourke," Holloway said, his eyes lighting up as he saw the patient. "Is it true? Did you capture the Veil girl?" Cale stepped in front of the bio bed, blocking Holloway's view. "She is a patient, Director, not a capture. Don't be naive." Holloway scoffed. "The war just ended. We need leverage for the peace talks. Imagine the image, the Oralith heir, in our custody. We need to get cameras in here. We need to parade her on the global feed. It will break their spirit completely, Sanzuk." "Get out," Cale said. Holloway stiffened. "Excuse me?" I said, "Get out." "She is critically wounded. She was being executed by her own soldiers. This is not a victory lap. This is a crime scene. She is an enemy combatant," Holloway shouted. "She is under my personal protection," Cale said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And on this ship, my word is law. If you want to argue, you can do it from the brig." Holloway turned red. He looked at Cale, then at the armed Marines standing by the door who were clearly siding with their commander. He adjusted his collar. "You are making a mistake, Rourke. The Senate will hear about this." Holloway turned and marched out. Cale exhaled, turning back to the bed. Seraphine was conscious. Her eyes were open, tracing the ceiling of the human medical bay. She looked terrified, but she was trying to hide it behind a mask of regal indifference. Her hand shot out, grabbing Cale's wrist. Her grip was weak, trembling. "You," she rasped. You are the human commander, the Wolf of Shardline. I am Kale, he said gently. You are safe here. Safe? She let out a dry, bitter laugh that turned into a cough. No one is safe. Not anymore. She pulled him closer. Her glowing eyes locked onto his. The Throne Eater, she whispered. What? Kale asked. The faction. Inside, she gasped, fighting for breath. They did not surrender to save the fleet. They surrendered to trap you. She fell back against the pillows, her eyes rolling back as the sedative administered by Dr. Eris took effect. The biobed monitor beeped steadily. She is stable, Eris said, looking at a scanner. But Commander, look at this tissue analysis, this black static energy. It is nanotechnology, but it is ancient. I have never seen coding like this. It is eating her cellular structure. I can slow it down, but I cannot stop it. Kale stared at the unconscious princess. The mystery was deepening. Commander, Lieutenant Corinne's voice came over the wall intercom. Go ahead, Kale said. We finished the analysis of the surrender transmission from the Sun Piercer, Corinne said. Her voice sounded shaken. And? The biometric signature on the order belongs to Grand Admiral Valero. That makes sense, Kale said. He is the fleet commander. Sir, Corinne hesitated. Intelligence confirmed 3 days ago that Admiral Valero died in the skirmish at Sector 9. We have his obituary from the Auralith news feeds. Kale felt a cold chill run down his spine. You are telling me a dead man just surrendered an entire empire to me? Kale asked. Yes, sir. The codes are valid, but the man who sent them has been a corpse for 72 hours. Kale looked down at Seraphine, Throne Eater. The war was over, but something much worse had just begun. Keep the ship on red alert, Kale ordered, and get me a security detail on this door. No one touches her. He stood in the silence of the medical bay, the weight of the unconscious princess's life now resting entirely on his shoulders. He had carried her home, thinking he was saving a prisoner. He realized now he had just smuggled a burning match into a powder keg. Consciousness returned to Princess Seraphine Vial not as a flood, but as a slow, agonizing assembly of fractured senses. The first thing she registered was the smell. It was sterile, acrid, and completely devoid of the floral ozone scent that permeated Auralith vessels. It smelled of recycled air and aggressive antiseptic. It smelled human. She forced her eyes open. The light was harsh, a flat white glare that stung her retinas. She tried to sit up, her instincts screaming that she was exposed, vulnerable, and likely in the hands of butchers. Her body rebelled immediately. A spike of nausea rolled through her, and a deep, freezing ache radiated from her side where the black energy had struck her. Careful, a voice rumbled from the corner of the room. The gravity plating is set to standard Terran weight. It is heavier than you are used to. Seraphine froze. She pushed through the pain, forcing her spine straight, locking her jaw. She would not show weakness. She turned her head slowly, with all the regal disdain she could muster, toward the shadow in the corner. Commander Kale Rourke sat in a metal chair, reading a data slate. He looked exhausted. The gray armor was gone, replaced by a black fatigue uniform that emphasized the width of his shoulders. He looked less like a soldier now and more like a tired laborer who had just finished a double shift at an orbital foundry. So, Seraphine said, her voice raspy but steady. The Wolf of Shardline watches his prey sleep. Is this standard human interrogation protocol? Or do you prefer to let your prisoners die of boredom before you torture them? Kale set the slate down. He stood up and walked toward the biobed. He moved with a predatory grace that contradicted his size. You are not a prisoner, Kyle said calmly. Seraphine laughed, a short, sharp sound. I am in a locked room, surrounded by enemies, on a warship that just decimated my fleet. I am a prisoner, Commander. Do not insult my intelligence with euphemisms. You are a protected political asset, Kale corrected. And you are a patient. If you were a prisoner, you would be in the brig on deck 9. Instead, you are in my personal medical suite. He reached for a pitcher on the bedside table and poured a glass of clear liquid. He held it out to her. Drink. It is water, enhanced with electrolytes. Your physiology is running hot trying to fight off the infection. Seraphine looked at the glass, then at him. Her violet eyes narrowed. And what is in it? Truth serum? A slow-acting neurotoxin? Just water. Your Highness, Kale said, his patience visible in the set of his jaw. If I wanted to kill you, I would have left you on that moon to let the ion storm finish the job. She hesitated, then snatched the glass from his hand. She drank it in one long draught, the cool liquid soothing the sandpaper feeling in her throat. She thrust the empty glass back at him. You saved me, she admitted, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. A tactical error. You should have let me die. My death would have martyred me and rallied the remnant sectors to a frenzy. Capturing me only gives you a bargaining chip that will expire the moment my cousin declares me a traitor. Kyle took the glass and set it down. I did not save you for politics, he said. I saved you because I do not let people get executed by their own squads while I am watching. It is a bad habit. Seraphine studied him. He was an anomaly. The Terran propaganda painted him as a ruthless tactician, a man who destroyed solar systems with mathematical indifference. But his eyes were not the eyes of a fanatic. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too much and liked very little of it. The door to the medical suite hissed open. A young ensign, looking terrified, stepped in holding a large wicker basket wrapped in shiny, crinkling cellophane. It was filled with synthetic fruits and a stuffed bear holding a heart. Delivery for the patient. Sir, the ensign squeaked, placing the basket on the foot of the bed and practically running out of the room before Kale could dismiss him. Seraphine stared at the basket, her face drained of color. She scrambled backward, pressing her back against the headboard, her breathing shallow and rapid. You lie, she hissed, pointing a trembling finger at the basket. You said I was safe. Kyle looked at the basket, then at her. It is fruit. Seraphine. It is a death shroud, she shouted, her poise cracking. The plastic wrapping, it mimics the stasis film used for corpses. And the effigy. The beast holding the heart. That is a ritual symbol of the organ harvest. You mock me with a ceremony of execution? Kale stared at her for a long second, and then he let out a sound that Seraphine had not expected. He laughed. It was a dry, rusty sound, but it was genuine. He reached out and ripped the cellophane off the basket, tossing it into a waste bin. He picked up the stuffed bear and squeezed it. It made a cheerful squeaking noise. It is a get-well-soon gift, Kale said, tossing the bear onto the chair. In human culture, we give sugar and soft objects to sick people. The plastic is just to keep it fresh. No one is harvesting your organs. Seraphine stared at the bear. She felt a flush of blue heat rise in her cheeks. Oh, she said softly. That is incredibly inefficient. Why would I want a synthetic beast when I am injured? It is the thought that counts, Kale said, leaning back against the counter. We are clumsy creatures, Princess. We try to be nice, and we end up looking like assassins. It is the story of our species. The tension in the room broke, replaced by a strange, awkward silence. For the first time, they looked at each other not as representatives of warring empires, but as two people trapped in an absurd situation. The door opened again. This time it was Dr. Eris. She did not look amused. She held a holographic tablet with a grim expression. "Commander, Highness, we have the results from the deep tissue scan." Seraphine straightened up, the embarrassment of the fruit basket forgotten. She knew her body. She knew the cold fire burning in her side was not a normal energy burn. "Tell me," Seraphine commanded. "It is a nanophage," Eris said bluntly. "It is not Auralith tech, and it is definitely not ours. It is ancient. The nanites are currently dormant, constructing a lattice around your central nervous system. They are feeding on your bioelectric field." "How long?" Kale asked. 10 days, Eris replied. "In 10 days. The lattice will complete its circuit. When it does, it will trigger a neural cascade. It will liquidate your brain functions instantly. It is a time-delayed assassination weapon designed to look like natural organ failure." Silence descended on the room. 10 days. "Is there a counter-agent?" Kale asked. "Not in our database," Aris said. "However, the nanites have a specific resonance frequency. I ran a search. The only substance capable of disrupting that frequency is a biocrystal enzyme found in the nectar of the night bloom orchid." Seraphine closed her eyes. "The sanctum of Karis," she whispered. Eris nodded. "Precisely. That orchid only grows in the subterranean gardens of the shrine world Karis. We need the raw enzyme, fresh. We cannot synthesize it. Karis is in the contested zone," Kale said, crossing his arms. "It is currently blockaded by the Auralith 7th Fleet and mined by the Terran defense grid. It is the most inaccessible planet in the sector." "Then I am dead," Seraphine said flatly. "My cousin controls the 7th Fleet. He is the one who ordered my death. He will never let a ship through." Kale looked at the tactical map on the wall. He stared at it for a long time. "Leave us." "Doctor," Kyle said. Aris nodded and withdrew. Kale walked to the window, looking out at the stars streaking by as the ironclad moved through warp space. "Why did you do it?" Kale asked, his back to her. "Do what?" "Surrender." Kale turned to face her. "I checked the logs. The surrender order came from Admiral Valero's codes, but Valero is dead. You sent it. You forged a dead man's signature to stop a battle you were losing. But you were not losing that badly. You still had reserves. You surrendered too fast. Why?" Seraphine looked at her hands. They were elegant, deadly hands, capable of playing the harp or crushing a windpipe. "Because winning would have been worse," she said quietly. "Explain." "There is a faction in the Imperial Senate," Seraphine began. "The Throne Eaters. They believe the war has gone on too long. They believe the Emperor, my father, is too soft. They wanted to end it with a single stroke." She looked up, her eyes blazing with intensity. "They refurbished a stellar collapse generator. We call it the Star Killer. It does not just destroy fleets. Commander, it destabilizes the fusion core of a star. It causes a supernova event. They were planning to test it on the Shardline system." Kale felt the blood drain from his face. The Shardline system had 3 inhabited planets, billions of lives. If the battle had continued, Seraphine continued, they would have fired it. They needed the chaos of the fleet engagement to mask the energy signature of the deployment. By surrendering, I froze the battlefield. I removed their cover. They could not fire without revealing themselves to the entire galaxy as monsters. Kale stared at her. He had spent 6 years hating the Auralith. He had thought them arrogant, cruel, and detached. And here sat the heir to their empire, who had sacrificed her own freedom and honor to save billions of humans and Orlith alike. He felt a shifting in his chest, a cracking of the rigid image he had built of the enemy. "You stopped a genocide," Kyle said softly. "And they tried to kill you for it." "Yes," she said. "And now I am dying anyway. The irony is quite rich, is it not?" The comms unit on Kale's belt chirped, "Commander, it is Director Holloway. He is demanding a status update. He says the council is convening in 20 minutes, Kale grimaced. "I have to take this." He walked to the door, but paused. He looked back at her. "You are not dying. Seraphine, not on my watch." He stepped out into the corridor. The conference room was dark, lit only by the holographic projections of the Terran War Council. 5 faces floated in the blue light, distorted by the transmission distance. Holloway stood in the center, looking smug. "Commander Rourke," General Vance said. He was a hawk-faced man with a scar running through his left eyebrow. "Holloway tells us you are coddling the prisoner." "She is an asset, General," Kale said, standing at attention. "She is a weapon," Vance barked. "We have the enemy air. We should be broadcasting her execution live on every frequency. It would crush their morale." "Negative," interrupted Counselor Way. "A sharp woman in a business suit. That is crude. We should use her, brainwash her, send her back as a puppet to destabilize their government." Kale listened to them debate her fate as if she were a piece of hardware. Execution, torture, psychological warfare. None of them spoke of the peace she had tried to buy them. None of them knew about the Star Killer. If he told them, they would likely try to capture the weapon for themselves. He realized then, with a sinking feeling, that the corruption Seraphine spoke of was not limited to her side. "Enough," Kyle said, his voice cutting through the bickering. The holograms fell silent. "She is sick." Kyle lied smoothly. "She contracted a virulent pathogen on the moon surface. If we parade her now, she will look weak. It will look like we mistreated her. That plays into their propaganda that we are savages. I need time to stabilize her." "How much time?" Vance asked suspiciously. 10 days, Kale said. "You have 5, Vance said. "If she is not ready for a broadcast in 5 days, Rourke, I will have you court-martialed for insubordination and I will execute her myself." The holograms flickered and vanished. Holloway smiled at Kyle. "Tick-tock. Commander." Kale returned to the medical suite. Seraphine was sitting up, trying to braid her silver hair with trembling fingers. She stopped when she saw his face. "They want blood, do they not?" she asked. "They want a show," Kyle said. "I am not going to give it to them." He walked over to the bed. He pulled a chair close and sat down, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. "We need ground rules," Kyle said. "Rules? If we are going to survive this, we have to stop playing games. No more lies. No more manipulation. You tell me everything you know about the Throne Eaters, and I tell you exactly how much trouble we are in." Seraphine studied him. She saw the fatigue in his eyes, but also a steely resolve that she found unexpectedly compelling. He was not a brute. He was a man holding up the sky. "Agreed," she said. "Rule 1. No coercion. We act as allies. Or not at all." "Agreed," Kale said. "Rule 2. Total transparency. If you have a plan, you tell me. No more secret surrender codes." "I can agree to that," she said. "Rule 3. You do not treat me like glass. I am a soldier. Kale, I might be dying, but I am not helpless." Kale looked at her wound, then at her fierce eyes. Fair enough. There was a moment then, a charged silence where the space between them seemed to shrink. He saw the intelligence behind her beauty. She saw the honor behind his violence. It was a dangerous thing, This mutual respect. It was the seed of something that could destroy careers and empires. The lights in the medical bay flickered. Cale's head snapped up. That wasn't a power surge, he whispered. That was a security override. He stood up, drawing the kinetic pistol from his hip. Get down, he ordered Seraphine. Before she could move, the ventilation grate in the ceiling exploded inward. Two dark figures dropped into the room, their boots hitting the floor with a heavy magnetic thud. They were clad in stealth suits that bent the light around them, making them look like shimmer ghosts. They raised silenced pulse rifles. Cale moved instantly. He did not fire. The risk of hitting Seraphine or the volatile medical equipment was too high. He tackled the bed, flipping it on its side to create a barrier just as the air filled with the hiss of plasma bolts. "Stay down!" Cale roared. He rolled over the top of the overturned bed, firing 3 rapid shots. His rounds sparked off the stealth shielding of the first assassin. The figure staggered but did not fall. A second assassin lunged from the left, a monofilament blade extending from his wrist. Cale caught the wrist with his left hand, the blade stopping inches from his throat. He drove his right knee into the assassin's midsection, feeling armor crunch. Seraphine, from the floor, grabbed a scalpel from a spilled tray. As the first assassin aimed at Cale's exposed back, she threw it. It was a desperate, weak throw, but it struck the assassin's visual sensor array. The figure flinched, distracted for a microsecond. That was all Cale needed. He headbutted the assassin he was grappling with, threw him into the wall, and spun around. He fired point blank into the neck seal of the distracted assassin. The figure dropped. The remaining assassin recovered and charged. Cale's gun clicked empty. He dropped it and met the charge with his bare hands. They crashed into the medical supply cabinet, glass shattering around them. It was a brutal, ugly brawl. The assassin was strong, mechanically enhanced, but Cale was fighting with the desperation of a man protecting something precious. Cale managed to rip the power pack out of the assassin's suit. The stealth field failed, revealing a human face, a mercenary. Cale slammed the man's head into the steel bulkhead, once, twice. The assassin went limp. Silence returned to the room, broken only by Cale's ragged breathing and the spark of a severed wire. Cale stood there, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead, his knuckles bruised. He looked around the room, ensuring there were no more threats. Then he looked over the overturned bed. Seraphine was huddled on the floor, clutching her side. Her face was pale, but her eyes were wide with shock. She looked at the dead men, then at Cale. "You," she stammered. "You fought them. Without armor." Cale offered her a hand. She took it, and he pulled her up, steadying her as she swayed. "Are you hit?" he asked urgently. "No," she said. "Cale, they were human." "I know," Cale said grimly. "They were sent by your own people to kill me. And you killed them." "I told you," Cale said, his voice rough. "You are under my protection." Seraphine looked at him, really looked at him, as if seeing a new color for the first time. In her world, protection was always transactional. Guards protected you because they were paid. Lords protected you because they wanted your favor. No one protected you simply because it was right, especially not at the cost of their own standing. "You risked everything," she whispered. "If the council finds out you killed their wet work team, then I guess I am a traitor too," Cale said. He walked over to the dead mercenary and searched his pockets. He found a decrypt key. He plugged it into his datapad. "It is confirmed," Cale said, reading the scrolling text. "The order came from General Vance's office. They are not going to wait 5 days. They want you dead now so they can parade the body and claim you died of your wounds. He looked at Seraphine. We cannot stay here. The ironclad is not safe. The moment I leave this room, they will try again, or they will relieve me of command and finish the job. What are we going to do? Seraphine asked. She felt a strange calm. The politics were gone. The complex web of alliances was gone. There was just the room, the danger, and this man. Kyle holstered his empty weapon and picked up a fresh power clip from the fallen assassin. You said the cure is on Karis, right? Yes, but the blockade. To hell with the blockade, Kyle said. He walked to the wall comms and punched in a private frequency. Miller, meet me in Hangar Bay 4. Prep the Phantom. Full stealth loadout. No flight plan. And bring the doctor if she is willing to commit treason. He turned back to Seraphine. His eyes were hard, burning with a reckless light. Pack your things, Princess. We are going for a ride. You are going to take me to Karis yourself? She asked, incredulous. You are defecting? I am finishing the mission, Kale said. I am carrying the wounded enemy princess home. And after I save your life, you and I are going to find out who is really pulling the strings of this war, and we are going to burn them down. Seraphine felt a smile touch her lips. It was not a courtly smile. It was sharp, dangerous, and alive. Very well, Commander, she said. Lead the way. The stealth corvette Phantom was not built for comfort. It was a dagger made of matte black composite, designed to slip through sensor nets and outrun interceptors. Inside, it smelled of recycled coffee, ozone, and the nervous sweat of 4 people trying to outrun 2 galactic superpowers. Miller, the pilot, sat hunched over the helm, his fingers dancing across the controls. He was a man who treated gravity like a suggestion rather than a law. We are passing the outer marker, Miller said over his shoulder, leaving Terran space in 5, 4, 3. And we are ghosts. Welcome to the Badlands. Ladies and gentlemen, in the cramped mess hall, Kale Rourke sat across from Princess Seraphine Vial. Between them sat Dr. Voren, an Oralith scientist they had extracted from the ironclad's brig before fleeing. Voren was a tall, spindly creature with skin like polished jade, and he looked like he was about to vibrate out of existence from sheer terror. This is madness, Voren muttered, his long fingers knitting together. We are flying a stolen ship into the rift corridor. The navigational hazards alone are 70% fatal. If the ion shear does not kill us, the hallucinations will. Eat your rations. Doc, Kale said, not looking up from his weapon maintenance. He was stripping down his kinetic pistol, his movements precise and mechanical. Seraphine sat perfectly still. She had discarded the ruined ceremonial silk for a spare gray flight suit Kale had found. It was 3 sizes too big. The sleeves rolled up to her elbows, but she wore it with the same dignity as a coronation gown. The contrast between her delicate, glowing features and the utilitarian, grease-stained fabric made Kale's chest ache in a way he refused to acknowledge. The rift is the only way to cut 3 days off our travel time, Seraphine said. Her voice was calm, but Kale saw the tight lines of pain around her eyes. The nanophage was working. Kale slid the barrel back into the receiver of his pistol with a sharp metallic clack. You heard the lady, Kale said. Miller, take us in. The Phantom Rift was not a place of matter. It was a scar in the dimension where time folded back on itself. Outside the viewports, the stars smeared into long ribbons of violet and bruised black. The ship shook violently, the hull groaning under the pressure of gravitational tides that defied physics. Kale stood on the bridge, gripping the rail. The air inside the ship felt heavy, thick with static electricity. Shields are holding at 40%, Miller shouted over the roar of the engines. but the chronometer is spinning backward. We are hitting the echo layer. Brace yourselves, Kale ordered. The white light hit them instantly. It was not blinding. It was internal. It bypassed the eyes and went straight to the mind. Kale was no longer on the bridge. He was standing in the ruins of the Auralith capital. Smoke choked the sky. In his hand, he held a heavy executioner's pistol. Kneeling before him was Seraphine. She looked up at him, not with fear, but with total defeat. Finish it, Commander. The vision Seraphine whispered. You won. Take your prize. In the vision. Kale raised the gun. He felt the cold logic of the war machine override his heart. He felt the satisfaction of total victory. He pulled the trigger. No! Kyle shouted, his own voice waking him from the nightmare. He gasped, stumbling back against the navigation console. He was back on the Phantom. The white light was fading. He looked across the bridge. Seraphine was slumped in the co-pilot seat, her eyes wide and terrified, tears streaming down her face. She was trembling violently. Kale moved before he thought. He crossed the deck and knelt beside her, grabbing her shoulders. Seraphine, look at me. It is not real. She stared at him, but she did not see him. She was seeing something else. I pushed the button. She sobbed, her voice broken. I let them fire the Star Killer. I saved my throne, but the stars, they are all dead. It is all cold ash. She was seeing the choice she did not make, the choice to stay loyal to her empire and destroy humanity. Kyle pulled her into his arms. It was awkward, restricted by the crash webbing and the armor. But he held her tight, pressing her head against his chest. You did not do it, Kyle said firmly, his voice rumbling against her ear. You stopped it. You are here. We are here. She gripped his shirt, her knuckles white. I saw a universe where I was the monster, she whispered. I saw one where I was the executioner, Kale admitted softly. They sat there for a long moment as the turbulence subsided. The ship broke through the rift, emerging into the calm velvet silence of deep space. Miller let out a long, shaky breath from the pilot's seat. Everyone still have their souls? Miller asked, his voice unusually thin. Good. Let us never do that again. Seraphine pulled back slowly. She looked at Kyle. The distance between them had vanished. They had seen the worst versions of themselves, and the other person was still there. Holding on. Thank you, she said, her voice steadying. Don't thank me yet, Kale said, helping her up. We still have half a galaxy to cross. The journey to the borderlands was long, forcing them into a routine of intimacy that was more dangerous than the war. The Phantom was small. There was no privacy. They ate together, planned together, and existed in a constant state of low-level collision to pass the time and distract Seraphine from the creeping pain in her side. They traded skills. In the small cargo bay, Seraphine stood with perfect posture, holding a data pad. No. Kale, she said, tapping the screen. Your inflection is like a blunt instrument. Auralith is a tonal language. You are saying I offer you peace, but the pitch you are using suggests I would like to purchase your livestock. Kale groaned, rubbing his temples. Why do you have 6 words for surrender? Kale asked. Nuance, Seraphine said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. One is for tactical defeat. One is for moral yielding. One is for the acceptance of a superior truth. You need to learn the difference if we are going to infiltrate the shrine. The monks will shoot you if you use the livestock inflection. She stepped closer, reaching out to adjust his jaw. Her fingers were cool and soft against his rough stubble. Drop your jaw, she instructed. Soften the vowel. Like this. She demonstrated the sound, a melodious hum. Kyle watched her mouth. He watched the way her eyes lit up when she was teaching, the way the pain seemed to recede when she focused. He forgot to repeat the sound. Focus. Commander, she teased gently. Your turn, Kyle said, stepping back to break the magnetic pull between them. Physical training. He tossed her a training knife. It was dull rubber but heavy. Show me the defensive stance I taught you. Seraphine fell into a crouch. It was elegant, fluid, and completely wrong for a street fight. Too pretty, Kale said. He moved in, sweeping her leg. She stumbled, but this time, she did not fall. She used the momentum, spinning and driving the rubber knife toward his ribs. Kale caught her wrist, blocking the strike, but she stomped on his boot hard. Kale winced, laughing. Better, he said. Dirty. I like it. You said honor gets you killed in a knife fight, Seraphine said, breathing hard. Exactly. The Oralith fight like they are composing a poem. Humans fight like we are trying to survive a bar brawl. You need to learn to brawl. Seraphine. He held her wrist, not letting go. They were close again. The smell of machine oil and her faint, exotic scent mixed in the air. The adrenaline of the spar faded into a heavy, electric tension. Kyle looked at her lips. He saw her breath hitch. We should. Kyle started, his voice rough. We should check the navigation. Seraphine finished breathlessly. She pulled her hand away, but her eyes lingered on his. It was a retreat, but a reluctant one. Station 42 was a tumor on the side of a massive, hollowed-out asteroid. It was a neutral zone, a black market city where the refuse of two galaxies washed up to trade, drink, and hide. Neon signs in a dozen languages flickered against the dark rock, advertising cheap fuel, expensive pleasure, and no questions asked. We need to meet the contact at the Blue Nebula Lounge, Kale said as they docked. He is a data broker. If anyone has the logs on the conspiracy, it is him. Seraphine stood by the airlock. She was wearing a heavy leather bomber jacket Kale had scavenged, a pair of dark goggles and a slouch hat pulled low. It was the most ridiculous thing Kale had ever seen. How do I look? She asked. Do I blend in? Kale tried to suppress a smile and failed. You look like a queen trying to dress up as a smuggler for a costume party, he said. It is the best I could do, she protested, my eyes glow. Kyle, it is a dominant genetic trait. Just keep your head down, Kale said, and let me do the talking. They moved through the crowded streets of the station. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of frying spices. Seraphine walked with a stride that was too long, too confident. People stared. A group of rough-looking miners whistled as she passed. Seraphine stopped and turned to them. I beg your pardon, she said, her voice projecting with perfect courtly diction. Do you have a query regarding my transit? The miners looked confused. Kale grabbed her arm and dragged her forward. Keep walking, he hissed. You are supposed to be a lowlife, not a diplomat. I do not know how to be a lowlife, she hissed back. It was not covered in the royal curriculum. They reached the Blue Nebula. It was a dark, throbbing club with music that shook the floor. Kale led them to a back booth where a small, amphibious creature with 4 eyes was waiting. This is the broker? Seraphine whispered. Quiet, Kale said. The broker, a creature named Nyx, slid a data drive across the table. The price has gone up, Nyx bubbled. The information you want? It is dangerous. 2 governments want to burn this data. We had a deal, Kale said, his hand drifting toward his hidden pistol. 3,000 credits? 5,000, Nyx said. Or I sell it to the hunter teams that are looking for you. Kale was about to threaten him, but Seraphine leaned forward. She pulled down her goggles, revealing her glowing violet eyes. The table fell silent. "Nix," she said, her voice dropping to the low, terrifying register of the High Court. "Do you know who I am?" Nix swallowed visibly. "You are the vile girl." "I am the heir to the Sun Throne," she corrected. "And if you attempt to extort me, I will not kill you. I will buy this station. I will buy the air scrubbers that keep you alive, and I will turn them off." She stared at him. It was a bluff of astronomical proportions. She had 0 credits to her name, but she delivered it with such absolute, terrifying certainty that Nix shrank back into his seat. 3,000 is fine, Nix squeaked. "Take it. Just go." Seraphine took the drive and stood up. "Pleasure doing business," she said. She walked out. Kale stared at her, then grabbed the drive and followed. Grinning. "I will buy the air scrubbers." Kale laughed as they hit the street. That was terrifying. "It was effective," Seraphine said, adjusting her goggles. "I told you I am learning to brawl." Back on the ship, the mood shifted from victory to horror. They plugged the drive into the Phantom's main computer. Dr. Voran decoded the encryption. Files began to scroll across the screen. Audio logs, bank transfers, communication intercepts. It was worse than they had imagined. "This is not just a coup," Kale said, reading the file headers. "It is a merger." The conspiracy was a joint venture. The extremist faction of the Auralith Empire, led by Seraphine's cousin, Lord Varys, had cut a deal with the Terran Defense Board. The humans would allow the Star Killer to be fired on a frontier system, a controlled tragedy. In exchange, the Auralith extremists would cede 5 resource-rich sectors to the human corporations. It was a war for profit. The genocide was just a line item in the budget. Kale froze as a familiar face appeared on a video log. It was an older man with silver hair and a kind face, wearing a Terran High Command uniform. "That is High Counselor Thorn," Seraphine said softly. Kale felt the room spin. Thorn was not just a counselor. He was Kale's mentor, the man who had recruited him, trained him, and told him that duty was the highest calling. Thorn was the father Kale never had. And in the video, Thorn was shaking hands with Lord Varys. "The war must continue," Thorn was saying in the recording. "Peace is bad for business, Lord Varys. We need a catastrophe to secure the new defense budget." Kale turned away from the screen. He slammed his fist into the bulkhead, denting the metal. "He lied to me," Kale whispered, "for 20 years. He told me we were fighting for survival. We were fighting for his stock portfolio." Seraphine watched him. She knew that pain. She saw her own cousin's signature on the execution order for her. She walked over to Kyle. He was shaking, consumed by a rage that was on the verge of breaking him. "Kyle," she said. "Don't," he warned, his voice cracking. "Do not tell me it is going to be okay. I will not," she said. "It is not okay. It is a rot, a poison, and we are the only ones who know." She reached out and took his hand. He tried to pull away, but she held on. She turned him to face her. "My cousin wants me dead," she said. "Your mentor sold you out. We have no flags anymore. Kyle, we have no countries. All we have is this ship, and each other." Kale looked down at her. The anger began to bleed away, replaced by a desperate, aching clarity. She was right. The universe had hollowed them out, stripped away every loyalty they had, until there was nothing left but the two of them standing in the dark. "I do not know how to do this without a command structure," Kyle admitted. "Then we build our own," Seraphine said. She stepped closer. The invitation was clear, but it was not a demand. It was a question. Kale looked at her lips, then into her eyes. "Seraphine," he said, his voice low. If I kiss you, it is not because of the adrenaline, and it is not because we are alone. It is because I want to, because I choose you. I choose you too. Cale, she whispered. He leaned down. The kiss was not like in the movies. It was desperate, hungry, and terrified. It tasted of grief and hope. Cale wrapped his arms around her, lifting her slightly, and she clung to him as if he were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. It was a sealing of a pact. They were no longer soldier and princess. They were partners. The shrine world of Karis was a place of haunting beauty. The phantom touched down in a deep valley, hidden by the canopy of massive bioluminescent ferns. The air was thick with floating spores that glowed soft blue in the dark. The enzyme is in the central sanctum, Dr. Voren said, checking his scanner. It is 3 clicks north. But the scans show activity. Aurolith Guard signatures. They know we are coming, Cale said, checking his weapons. Cale and Seraphine moved through the jungle. The anti-gravity properties of the planet made movement dreamlike. A single jump could carry them 20 feet. They used it to their advantage, bounding from rock spires to giant branches. They reached the sanctum. It was an ancient stone temple floating above a glowing lake. Guards patrolled the perimeter, elite shock troopers in gold armor. We cannot fight them all, Seraphine whispered. We do not have to, Cale said. Distraction and infiltration. They split up. Cale triggered a series of sonic decoys on the west side of the temple. As the guards rushed to investigate, Seraphine and Cale slipped in through the eastern ventilation shaft. The inner sanctum was a garden of silence. In the center, floating in a beam of starlight, was the night bloom orchid. It was huge, its petals black as void, dripping with a silver nectar. That is it, Seraphine said. She moved toward it. Cale stood watch, his gun trained on the door. Seraphine carefully extracted the nectar into a containment vial. Got it, she said. Freeze, a voice boomed. Doors on all sides burst open. Dozens of guards flooded in. But they were not just Aurolith. There were human mercenaries with them. The conspiracy's enforcement squad, and they were dragging Dr. Voren. The scientist was beaten, his green skin bruised purple. A mercenary held a gun to his head. Drop the weapon. Commander Rourke, the mercenary leader shouted, or the lizard gets it. Cale hesitated. He looked at Seraphine. She had the cure in her hand. If they surrendered, they died. If they fought, Voren died. I said drop it. Cale lowered his gun slowly. Let him go, Cale said. He is just a scientist. He is a traitor. A voice sneered. Lord Varys stepped out from behind the guards. He was tall, elegant, and had eyes that looked just like Seraphine's, only colder. Hello, cousin, Varys said smoothly. You look terrible. That flight suit does not suit you. Varys, Seraphine said, her voice dripping with ice. You sold our people for mining rights. I secured our future, Varys corrected. He looked at the mercenary. Kill the scientist. We do not need him. No! Seraphine screamed. Cale moved. He threw a flashbang grenade he had palmed in his left hand. The room exploded in blinding white light. Run! Cale shouted. He grabbed Seraphine and shoved her toward the balcony. He fired blindly into the crowd to suppress them. But Voren was too slow. A plasma bolt caught the scientist in the chest. He crumpled. Cale lunged for him, but another volley of fire forced him back. He is gone, Seraphine cried, pulling at Cale's arm. We have to go. Cale looked at Voren's body, then at the army closing in. He cursed, grabbed Seraphine, and they jumped from the balcony. They fell into the anti-gravity field, floating down rapidly toward the jungle floor. Laser fire streaked past them like angry hornets. They hit the ground running, sprinting back to the ship. They blasted off from Karis, the Phantom's engines screaming as they pushed the reactor to the red line. Kale sat in the pilot seat, his hands shaking with adrenaline and rage. They had lost Vorin. The good man who just wanted to help was dead. "We are clear of the atmosphere," Miller said, his voice grim. "But Commander..." "I am picking up a signal." "What signal?" "A passive tracker," Miller said. "They tagged the hull while we were in the temple. They know exactly where we are, and they are broadcasting our coordinates to the entire Terran and Auralith fleet." Kale slammed his hand on the console. "Jam it! I cannot! It is embedded in the composite." Behind them, a sound of glass shattering made Kale spin around. Seraphine had dropped the vial of enzyme. She was leaning against the bulkhead, clutching her chest. The black veins were no longer just on her side. They were creeping up her neck, visible under the skin. "Seraphine." Kale unbuckled and ran to her. He caught her as she collapsed. Her skin was burning hot. Her eyes were fluttering. "The surge," she gasped. "It is time." "No," Kale said, panic rising in his chest for the first time. "No! We have the enzyme." He looked at the vial on the floor. It was intact. He snatched it up. He lifted her, carrying her to the medbay. Miller set a course for the ocean planet in the rim sector. Kale shouted, "We need a place to hide. We have every ship in the galaxy looking for us." "Kale!" Miller yelled back. "I do not care. Get us there." Kale laid Seraphine on the biobed. He loaded the enzyme into a hypospray. Her breathing was shallow, rattling in her chest. "You are not going to die," Kyle said, his voice fierce, his eyes wet. "You hear me? You are not allowed to die." Seraphine looked up at him. Her vision was darkening. "Kale," she whispered. "The war." "Forget the war," Kale said, pressing the hypospray against her neck. He looked at her, his face inches from hers. "I will burn the whole galaxy down if I have to, Seraphine. But I am not letting you die for a war you tried to stop." He triggered the hypospray. The silver liquid hissed into her bloodstream. Seraphine arched her back, a gasp of pain escaping her lips, and then she went limp. The monitors shrieked a warning, then settled into a slow, weak rhythm. Kyle stood there, gripping her hand, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. They were hunted. They were branded traitors. They had lost their friend. But as he looked at the black veins slowly beginning to recede, Kyle knew one thing. The Wolf of Shardline was done following orders. The hunt was on. And this time, he was the one coming for them. The medical bay of the Phantom was a cage of flashing red lights and the high-pitched whine of critical failure alarms. The Corvette shuddered as Miller pushed the engines past their safety limits, putting distance between them and the Karis Shrine world. But inside the small, sterile room, the universe had shrunk down to the space between Kale Rourke and the woman dying on the biobed. Kale held the hypospray against Princess Seraphine's neck. His hand was steady, a soldier's hand, but his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The silver enzyme hissed into her bloodstream. For 3 seconds. Nothing happened. Then, Seraphine arched her back, a guttural cry tearing from her throat. Her eyes snapped open, glowing with a blinding, uncontrolled violet luminescence. The black veins that had been creeping up her neck pulsed violently, fighting the foreign agent. It was a war on a cellular level, biology against ancient nanotechnology. "Hold her down!" Kale shouted, though there was no one else in the room. He threw his weight across her legs as she thrashed. The monitors screamed. Her heart rate spiked to 200 beats per minute. Her temperature was climbing. "Kale," she gasped, her voice distorted by pain. "It burns." "Let it burn," Kale said, grabbing her hand and squeezing it until his knuckles turned white. "Fight it. Seraphine, Do not let go. The black lines on her skin began to retreat. It was slow at first, then rapid, like ink being sucked back into a pen. The darkness drained from her jawline, down her neck, receding toward the wound in her side. Steam rose from her skin, smelling of ozone and singed copper. With one final shuddering gasp, Seraphine collapsed back onto the mattress. The violet glow in her eyes dimmed to its natural, soft luminosity. The monitor tones shifted from the frantic staccato of emergency to the steady, rhythmic ping of stable life signs. Kale slumped against the bulkhead, sliding down until he hit the floor. He wiped sweat from his eyes, then he felt lightheaded. He realized he had not taken a breath in nearly a minute. "She is stable," the ship's computer announced in a cool, detached voice. "Pathogen neutralized." Kale laughed. It was a breathless, jagged sound. He looked up at the ceiling. "We got you," he whispered. The door hissed open. Miller stood there. The pilot looked pale, his usual sardonic grin replaced by grim tension. "I hate to interrupt the miracle, boss," Miller said, "but we have a problem." Kale stood up, his legs heavy. He walked to the bio-bed and checked Seraphine one last time. She was sleeping, a deep, restorative coma. He pulled the thermal blanket up to her chin. "What is it?" Kyle asked, walking out into the corridor. Miller handed him a datapad, the tracker they tagged us with. Miller said, "I cannot scrub it. It is embedded in the hull plating. I have managed to mask the signal for now by routing our engine feedback through the transmitter. But it is a temporary fix. They know generally where we are." "That is not the worst part," Miller added, tapping the screen. "Look at the news feeds." Kale took the pad. The holographic display projected a split screen. On the left was the Terran News Network. On the right was the Oralith Imperial broadcast. The Terran feed showed Kale's official service photo, overlaid with the word traitor in bold red letters. "Former Commander Kale Rourke is wanted for the murder of council operatives in high treason." The news anchor stated, "Intelligence reports suggest he has been compromised by enemy psychological warfare and has defected to the Oralith extremist faction." Kale swiped to the Oralith feed. It showed footage of Seraphine, not as the warrior he knew, but an old clip of her at a gala, looking young and naive, the fallen princess. The Oralith voiceover intoned. "Seraphine Vile has disgraced the bloodline. She has been seduced by the Butcher of Shardline. She conspires with the humans to dismantle the Empire from within. The High Council has stripped her of all rank and declared her excommunicado." Kale stared at the screens. They were masterpieces of spin. The conspiracy had moved fast. By painting Kale and Seraphine as monsters, the extremists ensured that no one would listen to the truth they carried. "They are terrified," Kale said quietly. Miller looked at him, confused. "Terrified. They have half the galaxy hunting us. They are terrified because we are still alive," Kale said, handing the pad back. "If we were just traitors, they would have blown us out of the sky. The fact that they are spending this much energy on propaganda means they know we have the proof." Kale looked toward the cockpit. "Get us to the ocean planet. Miller, we need to go to ground. We need to let the world think we are drowning while we learn how to swim." The planet of Aquila Prime was a world without land. It was a churning sphere of dark blue oceans, lashed by perpetual rain. The only habitable zones were the massive floating cities, sprawling platforms of steel and glass that drifted on the currents, anchored by gravity tethers that reached miles down into the abyss. The Phantom docked in the underbelly of District 9, a grimy industrial sector known for processing deep-sea kelp and harboring fugitives who paid their docking fees in cash. For 3 days, they stayed inside the ship, hiding in the shadow of the great hydraulic pumps. The rain hammered against the hull, a ceaseless rhythm that blurred the line between day and night. Inside, the atmosphere was a mix of intense planning and strange domesticity. Seraphine recovered with the speed of her enhanced biology. By the second day, she was out of bed. By the third day, she was in the mess hall, wearing Cale's oversized flight suit, arguing strategy with Miller. "We cannot just walk into the tribunal," Seraphine said, pointing at the star chart projected on the table. "Even if we present the data, the star killer is still active. My cousin will fire at the moment he realizes he has lost the legal battle. He will burn the evidence and the judges along with it." Miller chewed on a ration bar, looking exasperated. "So, let me get this straight," Miller said. "Step 1. Break into a top-secret facility inside a hollowed-out sun. Step 2. Disable a weapon that eats stars. Step 3. Survive long enough to sue 2 governments. Did I miss anything?" "Step 4, Cale said, walking in from the cargo bay. "Do not get shot." Cale placed a crate of supplies on the table. He looked at Seraphine. She looked better. The color had returned to her cheeks, and the haunted look was gone from her eyes, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. Miller looked between the two of them. Cale was standing too close to her chair. Seraphine was leaning toward him, her body language open, trusting. The air in the room felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. Miller groaned and threw his hands up. "Oh, for the love of the void, would you two just admit it?" "Admit what?" Seraphine asked, blinking. "That you are 2 geniuses falling in love while the galaxy burns," Miller shouted. "It is exhausting to watch. You look at each other like you are solving a complex equation that ends with a wedding." Cale stopped unpacking the crate. Seraphine froze. "Miller," Cale said, his voice low but with a hint of warning. "Check the external sensors." "I am checking them," Miller grumbled, sliding out of his chair, trapped on a tin can with the Romeo and Juliet of the space age. "Unbelievable." Miller stomped out of the room. The silence he left behind was thick. Seraphine looked down at the map, tracing the line of the trade route with her finger. "He is not entirely wrong," she said softly, "about the exhausting part." Cale pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "We are a complication." "Seraphine, we are the only thing that makes sense," she countered, looking up. Cale held her gaze. He wanted to reach out, but he forced himself to focus on the mission. "We have a new problem," Cale said, "the failsafe on the Star Killer. The data we stole from the broker indicates it is hardwired to a genetic lock. Only a member of the royal bloodline can disarm it manually." Seraphine nodded slowly. "That means I have to go inside, and it means I have to get you there," Cale said. "But we cannot do it alone. The Phantom is fast, but it is not a dreadnought. We need a distraction. We need an army." As if on cue, the communication console in the corner beeped. It was not the standard hail. It was a rhythmic, encrypted pulse. Kyle frowned. He tapped the console. "That is an old frequency," he muttered. "Pre-war." He keyed the receiver. "This is Iron 3 to Wolf Actual. Do you read, Commander?" Cale's eyes widened. "Sergeant Vance?" Cale asked. "You are supposed to be hunting me." "We were ordered to..." "Sir," the voice crackled. "But we saw the news. They called you a traitor. We served with you for 6 years. Commander, we know you do not turn, and we know you do not leave people behind." Cale felt a lump form in his throat. "Where are you, Vance?" "Holding position in the asteroid belt near Sector 4. We have 3 destroyers and a heavy cruiser. The captains mutinied when the kill order came down. We are calling ourselves the Peace Guard. We are awaiting orders." Cale looked at Seraphine. She was smiling, a fierce, proud smile. "Wait," she said, leaning toward the mic. She adjusted the frequency modulation to the aurolith band. She tapped out a sequence of tones, the specific cadence of the Royal Guard Honor Corps. Seconds later, a response came through. It was musical, sharp, and disciplined. We hear the song, "Highness, the remnant fleet stands ready. We have been waiting for your signal. The usurper Varus has no honor." Seraphine sat back, letting out a breath she seemed to have been holding for days. "We have our army," she said. "It is not a big army," Kale cautioned. "It is enough," Seraphine said. "It is an army of conscience. That is stronger than an army of conscripts." That night, the rain over District 9 turned into a deluge. Thunder shook the floating city, vibrating through the hull of the Phantom. Miller was asleep in the cockpit. The ship was quiet, save for the hum of the reactor. Kale could not sleep. He sat in the observation blister, watching the water run down the transparent steel glass. The lights of the city below blurred into streaks of neon blue and pink. The door slid open. Seraphine walked in. She was wearing a simple tunic she had found in the ship's stores. She held 2 mugs of steaming tea. She handed one to him and sat on the bench beside him. They watched the rain in silence for a long time. "Are you afraid?" Seraphine asked. Kale took a sip of the tea. It was bitter, but hot. "I am afraid of failing," he said. "I am afraid that even if we win, the galaxy will never forgive us. We will always be the traitor and the exile." "Does that matter?" she asked. "It matters for you," Kyle said, turning to look at her. "You were born to rule. You belong in a palace, Seraphine, not running from bounty hunters in a leaky Corvette. If we do this, you lose your crown, you lose your home." Seraphine set her mug down. She turned her body toward him, pulling her legs up onto the bench. "I never wanted the crown. Kyle, I wanted the safety of my people." She reached out, her fingers tracing the scar that ran along Kale's jawline. "This scar," she said. "Shard line?" Kale nodded. "Shrapnel. 3 years ago." She pulled the collar of her tunic down slightly, revealing a jagged white line on her shoulder. "Plasma burn," she said. "Sector 8, 2 years ago." She looked into his eyes, her gaze unflinching. "We have spent our lives collecting scars for other people's wars. We have been hollowed out by duty. For the first time. Kale, I feel full. I feel like I am choosing my own scar." Kale set his mug down. The space between them seemed to vanish. "You are dangerous, Seraphine Vial," he whispered. "So are you." "Kale Rourke," she replied. He leaned in. This time, there was no desperation. There was no adrenaline. It was slow, deliberate. When his lips touched hers, it was a question asked and answered. She moved into his lap, her arms going around his neck. Kyle held her, his hands tangling in her silver hair. The kiss deepened, becoming an anchor in the storm. They moved to the small cabin in the back. There were no grand declarations, no melodramatic vows. There was just the sound of the rain, the warmth of skin, and the profound relief of 2 soldiers laying down their armor. It was an act of defiance. In a universe that demanded they kill each other, they chose to hold each other. They explored the map of each other's bodies, the scars, the tension knots, the softness that the war had failed to erase. It was intimate, raw, and entirely consensual. It was a reclaiming of their humanity. Later, lying in the dark, Seraphine rested her head on Kale's chest. "If we die tomorrow," she whispered. "We won't," Kale said, his arm tightening around her. "But if we do," she insisted, "this was enough. This was worth it." Kale kissed the top of her head. Sleep. Princess, we have a war to end in the morning. Morning on Aquila Prime was a gray, hazy affair. The rain had stopped, but the fog was thick. Seraphine woke up alone. The other side of the bunk was cold. For a second, panic flared in her chest, the old instinct of the hunted. Then she heard the clatter of pans in the mess hall. Kale was making breakfast. She smiled, stretching. She felt sore, but it was a good soreness. She felt real. She reached for her datapad on the nightstand to check the time. A message notification blinked on the screen. It was priority red. She frowned. She opened it. The sender ID was masked, but the encryption key was Terran High Command. Subject, Immunity Agreement confirmed. To Commander Kale Rourke. From High Council Defense Board. Message, terms accepted. Delivery of the Auralith asset, target Vael, to sector coordinate 55 Alpha at 0800 hours is approved. Upon transfer of the prisoner, your rank will be restored and all charges of treason will be expunged. The shuttle is waiting. Do not fail us, Commander. Seraphine stared at the screen. The words blurred. Delivery of the asset, transfer of the prisoner. The warmth of the previous night evaporated, replaced by a cold, nausea-inducing dread. It was exactly what her advisors had always warned her about. Humans were transactional. They sold anything, even love, especially love. 0800 hours. That was in 40 minutes. She stood up, wrapping the sheet around her. She felt like she couldn't breathe. The betrayal was so sharp it felt like a physical knife in her gut. She walked into the mess hall. Kyle was standing by the stove, flipping synthetic eggs. He looked over his shoulder and smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that made her heart break. "Morning," he said. "I hope you like powdered eggs, because that is the specialty of the house." Seraphine did not smile back. She held up the datapad. "Explain this," she said. Her voice was steady, but it cost her everything to keep it that way. Kale frowned. He turned off the stove and wiped his hands on a rag. "Explain what?" He walked over and took the pad. He read the message. His expression went flat. He read it again. Seraphine watched him. She was waiting for the guilt. She was waiting for the stammered excuse. She was waiting for him to reach for his gun. Kale looked up. He did not look guilty. He looked furious. "You think this is real?" he asked. "It is high command encryption," Seraphine said. "It has your service ID. It has the coordinates of the extraction point just outside the city." Kale tossed the pad onto the table. It clattered loudly. "Think, Seraphine. If I wanted to sell you out, why did I fight off the assassins on the ironclad? Why did I fly into the rift? Why did I sleep with you last night? Was that part of the interrogation technique?" "People change their minds when they are offered their life back," she said, her voice trembling. "You said it yourself. You are afraid of being a traitor. This offers you a way home." Kyle stepped closer. He did not touch her, but he stood in her space, forcing her to look at him. "I am already home," he said fiercely. He grabbed the datapad again. "Look at the syntax. Do not fail us, Commander. That is not standard military protocol. That is personal. And look at the timestamp. It was sent 3 minutes after you woke up. They are tracking our biorhythms." He tapped the screen violently. They knew the moment we became intimate. They knew the emotional bond was the biggest threat. This is a wedge. They are trying to make you doubt me because they know they cannot beat us when we are united. Seraphine looked at the message again. She looked at Kale. She saw the anger in his eyes, but it was anger at the message, not at her. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She remembered the Throne Eater warning. She remembered the lesson she had learned about the surrender. Look at the evidence, not the fear. The encryption style, Kale said, pointing to the header. It uses a triple helix cipher. There is only one person in high command who uses that specific coding for personal comms. Counselor Thorne, Seraphine whispered. Your mentor. Kale nodded grimly. He knows me. He knows I value duty. He thinks he can manipulate me by offering me my honor back. And he thinks you are paranoid enough to believe he succeeded. Seraphine looked at Kale. The doubt cracked and shattered. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his waist, burying her face in his chest. I am sorry, she murmured. It looked so real. It was designed to, Kale said, holding her tight. That is how the machine works. It separates people. It isolates them so they can be controlled. He pulled back and looked at her. We are not going to let them do it. We are going to use it. Use it? If Thorne thinks I am coming to the rendezvous, Kale said, a dangerous glint in his eye, then let us give him a show. But we are not going to use the shuttle he sent. 30 minutes later, the Phantom lifted off from District 9. Kale sat in the pilot's chair. Seraphine sat beside him, fully armored in the gear they had scavenged. Miller. Open a channel, Kale ordered. Wideband, encrypted on the Peace Guard and Remnant frequencies. But make it capable of being intercepted by the Tribunal scanners. Channel open, Miller said. Recording in 3, 2, 1. Kale looked into the camera lens. He did not look like a traitor. He looked like a commander. This is Commander Kale Rourke of the Terran Coalition. Seraphine leaned into the frame. She looked regal, terrifying, and undeniably alive. And this is Princess Seraphine Vial of the Auralith Empire, Kale continued, his voice steady and hard. For 6 years, you have been told that we are enemies. You have been told that this war is necessary for survival. You have been lied to. The war is a product, Seraphine said. It is being manufactured by a conspiracy between the Terran Defense Board and the Auralith Throne Eaters. They are trading your blood for mining rights and profit margins. They have a weapon, Kyle said. A star killer. They intend to use it to cement their control. They have branded us traitors because we hold the proof. Seraphine looked directly into the camera. We are coming for the weapon. To the Peace Guard and the Remnant. If you want a future that is not built on ashes, stand with us. To the conspirators, you tried to break us. You tried to buy us. You failed. We have the blueprint to break your machine. Kale finished. And we are coming to dismantle it, brick by brick. Wolf Actual, out. Miller cut the feed. Signal sent, Miller said. It is bouncing off every relay in the sector. They can't stop it. Kale throttled the engines forward. The Phantom shot up through the clouds, breaking the atmosphere, soaring toward the stars. Set coordinates for the Star Killer facility, Kale said. Let us go end this war. The Cinder Husk was a graveyard of physics, a hollowed-out Dyson structure built around the corpse of a white dwarf star. It hung in the void like a fractured skull, its surface a chaotic mesh of industrial scaffolding, heat sinks, and weapon batteries. Inside that shell lay the Star Killer, a device capable of destabilizing a sun's core and turning a solar system into a cloud of superheated ash. The Phantom ran silent, its engines cold, drifting through the debris field that surrounded the installation. Inside the cockpit, the tension was a physical weight. We are crossing the sensor perimeter, Miller whispered, his hands hovering over the controls. If the stealth drive flickers for even a microsecond, we are dust. Kale Rourke stood behind the pilot's chair, staring at the monolithic structure. It was ugly. It was the architecture of genocide, pure function, devoid of soul. Hold steady, Kale said. Wait for the distraction. On the tactical display, the void suddenly lit up. 3 Aurolith destroyers dropped out of warp space on the far side of the station. They were painted in the colors of the Remnant, the loyalists who had refused Varys's order. Flanking them were 4 Terran frigates, their hulls scarred and scorched. The Peace Guard, the 2 fleets, formerly enemies, moved in a perfect synchronized formation. "This is Captain Vance of the Peace Guard," a voice crackled over the comms. "Engaging defense platforms. Wolf Actual, you have your window. Go." The space around the cinder husk erupted. Kinetic railgun rounds from the human ships slammed into the station's shields, creating ripples of blue fire. Simultaneously, the Aurolith destroyers unleashed lance beams of focused light, dissecting the automated turrets. "Now!" Kale shouted. Miller punched the throttle. The Phantom screamed out of the debris field, its stealth drive disengaging as it diverted all power to engines. They were a black streak against the White Dwarf's pale glow. They flew straight into the station's maintenance trench. Anti-aircraft fire stitched the space around them. But Miller rolled the Corvette with impossible precision, skimming the surface so closely that Kale could see the rivets on the hull plating. "Breaching charge armed," Seraphine yelled from the co-pilot seat. She triggered the detonator. A missile detached from the Phantom's wing, slamming into the hangar bay doors ahead of them. The explosion blew the blast doors inward. Miller fired the reverse thrusters and the Corvette skidded into the hangar, crashing through crates and fuel lines before grinding to a halt in a shower of sparks. The ramp dropped before the ship stopped moving. "Go! Go! Go!" Kale roared. He led the charge. Behind him were 12 soldiers, a mixed squad of human Marines from the Peace Guard and Aurolith Royal Commandos who had defected. They hit the deck running. The hangar was in chaos. Alarm klaxons blared. Gravity was failing due to the external bombardment, fluctuating wildly between standard weight and 0G. "Enemy contact!" a Marine shouted. A squad of corporate mercenaries, clad in heavy exosuits, poured into the hangar. They opened fire with heavy repeaters. "Take cover," Kyle ordered. The firefight that followed was a dizzying spectacle of contrasting war doctrines. The human Marines clamped their magnetic boots to the floor, firing disciplined, kinetic volleys from behind cover. The Aurolith Commandos, however, deactivated their gravity boots. They kicked off the walls, flying through the air with fluid grace, their energy shields flaring as they absorbed incoming fire. Kale watched as an Aurolith commando deflected a grenade with a psionic shield, sending it bouncing back toward the mercenaries, while a human sniper picked off the survivors. It was the first time in history these 2 styles had been used together, and it was devastatingly effective. "We have to split up," Seraphine shouted over the noise of the battle. "The command spire is a kilometer up. The genetic lock is there." Kale reloaded his rifle. "I will take the main corridor," he said. "I will draw their heavy security, and that will leave the service shafts open for you." Seraphine looked at him. Her eyes were glowing fierce violet. She grabbed his armor plating and pulled him down for a hard, desperate kiss. "Do not die, Kale Rourke," she commanded. "That is a direct order," he said, grinning through the grime on his face. "I intend to follow it." She released him and sprinted toward the ventilation shafts, flanked by 2 of her royal guards. Kyle turned to his team. "All right, you ugly bastards," Kyle yelled. "We are the distraction. Make as much noise as humanly possible." The climb to the command spire was a nightmare of verticality. Seraphine moved through the service shafts, climbing hand over hand in the low gravity. The air was hot, smelling of ozone and burning circuitry. She could hear the battle raging below, the thud of human explosives and the singing whine of Aurolith lasers. Kyle was buying her time with blood. She reached the upper maintenance hatch and kicked it open. She emerged onto a high gantry overlooking the facility's core. Below her, the Star Killer device pulsed. It was a massive ring of dark metal, suspended around a containment field that held a sphere of unstable solar plasma. The heat was intense, even from this distance. "Welcome home, cousin." Seraphine froze. She turned slowly. Lord Varys stood at the end of the gantry. He wore the ceremonial armor of the Emperor, a blasphemous sight. In his hand, he held a void blade, a weapon of compressed energy that crackled with a sound like tearing fabric. "Varys," Seraphine said, drawing her own weapon, a simple, solid-state vibro sword she had borrowed from Kael's armory. "You brought humans here," Varys said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "You brought the animals into the Holy of Holies. I brought allies," Seraphine corrected. "I brought the future. You are just standing in the ashes of the past." Varys laughed. It was a cold, empty sound. "The past is strength, Seraphine. We were gods once. We ruled the stars before these apes crawled out of their oceans. I am merely restoring the natural order." He lunged. Varys was fast. His void blade slashed through the air, leaving a trail of distorted light. Seraphine parried, the impact vibrating up her arm. She was not a duelist of his caliber. Varys had been trained by the sword masters of the inner court. Seraphine had been trained in diplomacy, but she had also been trained by Kael Rourke. Varys pressed the attack, a flurry of elegant, lethal strikes. Seraphine gave ground, retreating down the narrow walkway. "You fight like a peasant," Varys sneered, locking blades with her. No form, no grace. Seraphine gritted her teeth. She saw an opening, not a tactical one, but a physical one. She didn't try to disengage gracefully. Instead, she headbutted him. The impact of her forehead against his nose crunched sickeningly. Varys staggered back, stunned, blood streaming down his face. "It is called a brawl." "Varys." Seraphine spat. She didn't let up. She kicked his knee, shattering the joint of his armor. As he buckled, she used the hilt of her sword to strike his wrist, sending the void blade spinning into the abyss below. Varys fell to the grating, gasping. Seraphine stood over him, the tip of her vibro sword at his throat. "Go ahead," Varys wheezed, looking up at her with hateful eyes. "Kill me. Prove you are strong enough to take the throne. The throne is built on blood, Seraphine. If you cannot spill mine, you cannot rule." Seraphine looked down at him. She saw the madness in his eyes, the absolute conviction that cruelty was the only form of power. She raised the sword. Varys flinched, expecting the blow. Instead, she deactivated the blade and clipped it back to her belt. "I am not you," she said quietly, "and I do not want your throne." She turned her back on him and ran toward the control console. The Star Killer was active. The countdown on the main screen read, 2 minutes to ignition. Kael kicked open the doors to the central security hub. The room was filled with the bodies of mercenaries and Peace Guard soldiers. The air was thick with smoke. At the center of the room, behind a wall of reinforced glass, sat High Counselor Thorne. The old man looked calm. He was watching the battle on a bank of monitors, sipping a cup of tea, as if he were watching a stock market ticker rather than a slaughter. Kael walked up to the glass. He raised his kinetic rifle and fired 3 rounds into the locking mechanism. The glass shattered. Kael stepped through the shards, his weapon trained on Thorne's chest. "It is over." "Thorne," Kael said, his voice rough with smoke and rage. Thorne turned his chair. He looked at Kael with a disappointed expression, like a teacher looking at a student who had failed a simple exam. "You were always so emotional." "Kael," Thorne said, "it was your greatest strength as a field commander and your greatest weakness as a strategist. You sold us out." Kale said. You engineered a war for profit. I engineered stability, Thorne snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. Do you have any idea how fragile the economy was before this war? We were on the brink of collapse. The war created jobs. It created unity. It gave people a purpose. It gave them graves. Kale shouted. Thorne stood up. Civilization requires sacrifice. Kale, we managed the conflict. We kept the death tolls within acceptable variances. Acceptable variances? Kale repeated, stepping closer. You are talking about millions of people. You are talking about my friends. He pressed the barrel of the rifle against Thorne's forehead. Give me one reason why I should not paint this wall with your brains. Thorne looked into the barrel of the gun. He did not blink. Because you are a soldier, Kale. And soldiers follow the law. If you kill me now, you are just a murderer. You proved that I was right, that chaos is the only alternative to my control. Kale's finger tightened on the trigger. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to pull it, to end the man who had manipulated him for 20 years, to take vengeance for the dead. But he heard Seraphine's voice in his head. We are not them. Kale exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. He lowered the rifle. You are right, Kale said. I am a soldier, and soldiers do not execute unarmed prisoners. He struck Thorne across the face with the butt of the rifle. The counselor crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Kale tapped his comms. Secure the prisoner and get the cameras ready. I want the entire galaxy to see him in handcuffs. Warning. Cleansing protocol initiated. The voice of the facility's computer echoed through the station. Kale looked at the monitors. The Star Killer was spooling up. The magnetic containment field around the solar plasma was beginning to retract. Seraphine, Kale yelled into the comms. What is happening? I am locked out. Seraphine's voice came back, frantic. Varys changed the encryption. The manual override is the only way, but the interface... Kale, it requires direct genetic integration. It is inside the energy field. Kale watched the monitor. He saw the figure of Seraphine on the gantry. She was moving toward the exposed plasma stream. Seraphine, do not do it, Kale shouted. It will vaporize you. It is the only way, she cried. The interface needs royal blood. It needs to taste the DNA. Seraphine stepped into the outer edge of the containment field. The pain was immediate and absolute. It was not heat. It was pure radiation and psionic pressure. It felt like her soul was being peeled away from her bones. She screamed, a sound that tore through the comms channel. She forced herself forward. 1 step, 2 steps. Her armor began to blister. Her skin turned red, then white. She reached the central pedestal. It was a monolith of white stone. She placed her hand on the sensor plate. Genetic scan initiated. The machine dug into her. It analyzed her blood, her lineage, her right to command. Identity confirmed. Princess Seraphine Vielle. The system paused. Override requires secondary authorization. System is in lockdown. Seraphine fell to her knees, her hand still burning on the plate. I command you, she screamed at the machine. Stand down. Authorization denied. Command codes outdated. She was failing. The radiation was eating her alive. She could feel the darkness creeping into the edges of her vision. Suddenly, a second hand slammed down onto the sensor plate next to hers. Kyle. He had sprinted from the security hub, tearing through the corridors, ignoring the heat, ignoring the radiation warnings. He stood beside her, his hand covering hers. Kale, get back, Seraphine gasped. Override code, Wolf Actual 01. Kale roared at the machine. Terran command code detected. The computer droned, cross-referencing with Oralith Royal Protocol. The machine seemed to hesitate. It was confused. It was designed to accept orders from one side or the other. It had never processed a joint command. Unprecedented input. The computer stated, Alliance Protocol Gamma, activated. The Star Killer didn't just shut down, it reversed. The containment field snapped back into place, sealing the solar plasma. The red alert lights turned to a cool, steady blue, core stabilized, weapon systems offline. Kale and Seraphine collapsed together on the gantry. The heat dissipated instantly as the emergency venting systems kicked in. Kale coughed, rolling onto his back. He looked at his hand. It was burned, red and raw, but still there. He looked at Seraphine. She was breathing hard, her silver hair matted with sweat, but alive. Did we do it? She whispered. Kale laughed, wheezing. We broke the machine. Princess. The extraction was a blur. The Peace Guard and the remnant fleet secured the perimeter. Thorn was dragged in chains to the Phantom. Varys, broken and limping, was taken into custody by his own former guards, who looked at him with disgust. The journey back to the neutral zone, to the Great Tribunal Station, took 2 days. When the airlock of the Phantom opened at the Tribunal, the noise was deafening. It was not the sound of battle. It was the sound of flashbulbs and a billion voices shouting questions. The dock was packed. Reporters from every system, delegates from the Terran Coalition, nobles from the Auralith Empire. They had all seen the broadcast. They had all seen the evidence Kale and Seraphine had transmitted. They were waiting for the monsters. They were waiting for the traitors. Kale stepped out first. He wore his scarred gray armor, unpolished. He looked tired, dangerous, and utterly unapologetic. He turned and offered his hand. Seraphine stepped out. She wore no silk, no crown. She wore the simple flight suit she had fought in, stained with oil and blood. She took Kyle's hand. A hush fell over the crowd. They walked down the ramp together. They did not walk as conqueror and captive. They walked as equals. Kale held up a data crystal. It glowed with the undeniable proof of the conspiracy. We have a statement to make, Kale announced, his voice carrying to the back of the massive hangar. He looked at Seraphine. She squeezed his hand. The war is over, Seraphine said, and the reckoning has begun. They walked forward into the light of the cameras, 2 people who had stood against the galaxy and won, holding hands in the center of the storm. The Grand Tribunal Hall of the Neutral Zone was a masterpiece of intimidation. It was a vast circular amphitheater hewn from black marble, capable of seating 5,000 delegates, with millions more watching via the holographic arrays that floated like ghosts in the upper tiers. The air was cold, recycled, and thick with the static of 1,000 whispering voices. Kale Rourke stood in the center of the arena floor, a small figure in scarred gray armor against the towering dais of the judges. Beside him stood Princess Seraphine Vial. She had refused the offer of a fresh gown, choosing to remain in her oil-stained flight suit. It was a visual statement that screamed, I am not a symbol, I am a soldier. The prosecutor, a Terran corporate lawyer named Sterling with a smile like a shark, paced in front of them. He was playing to the cameras, his voice amplified to boom through the hall. The defense paints a pretty picture, Sterling said, gesturing vaguely at the pair. A tragic romance, a hero and a princess crossing lines to save the galaxy. It is excellent fiction, but we are here for facts. Sterling tapped a data pad, and a massive holographic screen flickered to life above the arena. It showed grainy, edited footage of Kale dragging Seraphine onto the Phantom during their escape from the Ironclad. Fact, Sterling barked. Commander Rourke kidnapped a high-value prisoner. Fact, he utilized unauthorized psychological techniques to induce Stockholm Syndrome. Fact. The so-called evidence of a conspiracy is a fabrication created by a rogue officer to justify his treason and by a disgraced royal desperate to regain her relevance. The crowd murmured. The narrative was seductive. It was easier to believe in a rogue soldier and a weak princess than to believe that their own governments were selling them for parts. Seraphine stepped forward. She did not ask for permission to speak. She simply commanded the silence. "Mr. Sterling," Seraphine said, her voice clear and melodious, cutting through the murmurs. "You speak of facts. Let us discuss the mathematics of the Shard-Line surrender." She turned to the high judges, 3 ancient beings from neutral systems who watched with impassive, compound eyes. "I ordered the surrender of the Orlith fleet 7 minutes before our shields would have failed," Seraphine stated. "Tactical analysis confirms we had 30% combat efficacy remaining. Why would a commander surrender a fighting force that could still inflict heavy casualties?" "Because you were coerced," Sterling interjected smoothly. "Because I was saving your children," Seraphine snapped, her eyes flashing violet. She pointed to the data stream Kale had uploaded. The surrender was timed to the exact second the Star Killer capacitor began its charging cycle. If the battle had continued, the energy signature of the weapon would have been masked by the fleet engagement. By stopping the fire, I forced the weapon to stand down or reveal itself. I did not surrender to save my fleet. Mr. Sterling, I surrendered to save yours. Sterling laughed. A convenient story. But where is the proof of this weapon? We have scans of a mining facility. Nothing more. Kale stepped up beside her. He looked at the cameras, then at the gallery where the Terran Defense Board sat. He saw the empty chair where Counselor Thorne should have been. Thorne was currently in a holding cell, but his lawyers were already spinning a web of denial. "The proof is in the transmission logs," Kale said, his voice gravelly and loud. "The surrender order from the Orlith flagship was signed by Admiral Valero." "So?" Sterling asked. "Admiral Valero died 3 days before the battle," Kale said. "I have his autopsy report from the Orlith archives. The signature was a digital forgery. The encryption key used to forge it belongs to the same network that authorized the Star Killer's fuel injection." Kale looked at the judges. The conspiracy forged the surrender to create confusion. They wanted a massacre. When Seraphine gave the real order, she broke their script. Sterling waved his hand dismissively. "Forgeries can be faked, Commander. You had access to the Orlith computer systems for days while you held the princess hostage. You could have planted those logs yourself." The prosecution rested on a single terrifying point. Without a living witness who could tie the two sides together, it was just Kale and Seraphine's word against the established order. And the order was powerful. "We need a recess," the head judge rumbled. "The evidence is inconclusive." A heavy door at the side of the arena hissed open. "No recess is required," a voice croaked from the shadows. The hall went silent. A medical hover chair floated into the light. Sitting in it, wrapped in biofoam bandages and looking like he had been chewed up by a garbage compactor, was Dr. Vorin. Seraphine gasped. Kale felt his knees almost buckle with relief. "Vorin?" Kale breathed. "I am hard to kill. Commander," Vorin wheezed, tapping his chest. "My internal organs are redundant." The plasma bolt missed the secondary heart. Vorin guided his chair to the center of the room. He looked at Sterling, then at the judges. "I am Dr. Vorin, former Chief Science Officer of the Orlith Imperial Research Division, and I am the man who built the encryption for the Star Killer." Sterling turned pale. "This man is a defector," Sterling shouted. "His testimony is tainted. His testimony is mathematical," Vorin countered. He held up a small data chip. When the mercenaries captured me on Karis, they did not kill me immediately. They needed me to unlock the final firing protocols. They thought they could torture the codes out of me. Vorin smiled, a gruesome expression on his bruised face. They were arrogant. They connected me to their local network to run a neural scan. They did not realize that I have a cybernetic interface in my cortex. I did not just lock the files. I downloaded their entire communication history. He slotted the chip into the tribunal's central reader. The holographic screens above the arena changed. They stopped showing news footage and started showing bank transfers. Billions of credits moving from Terran shell corporations to Auralith extremist accounts. Emails between Councillor Thorne and Lord Varys detailing the exact coordinates for the planned tragedy at Shardline. And finally, a video log of Thorne. The war is a stabilizing agent. Thorne's image said to the camera, "We burn the rim sectors to keep the core worlds frightened and compliant. It is just business." The silence in the hall was absolute. It was the silence of a narrative shattering. The war profiteers in the gallery began to stand up, trying to leave. But the tribunal guards had already sealed the doors. "I believe," Dr. Vorin said, leaning back in his chair, "that concludes the defense." The verdict was swift and devastating. The tribunal voted unanimously for emergency transitional oversight. The Terran Defense Board was suspended pending a full criminal inquiry. The Auralith High Council was dissolved, with warrants issued for every member of the Throne Eater faction. But the real drama happened in the private chambers behind the arena, where the power brokers tried to salvage what was left of their empires. Seraphine sat at a long table opposite a delegation of Auralith loyalists. They looked at her with awe and terror. She was the woman who had walked into a star. "Your Highness," the lead delegate said, bowing low. "The throne is yours. The people are chanting your name. You must return to the capital and restore the dynasty." Seraphine looked at the golden stylus they placed before her. It was the instrument of absolute rule. "I will return," Seraphine said slowly, "but not to restore the dynasty." She pushed the stylus away. "I will accept the throne on 2 conditions. 1, the dissolution of noble immunity. No more unassailable lords. If a duke commits a crime, he faces a tribunal just like a commoner." The delegates looked horrified. "Highness, that is radical," one whispered. "And 2," Seraphine continued, her voice hard, "a parliament of non-royal worlds. The rim sectors, the mining colonies, the people we have been bleeding dry for centuries. They get a vote. They get a seat at the table. But that will end the imperial era," the delegate protested. "Good," Seraphine said. "It is time for something new. Take the deal, or I abdicate right now and leave you to the wolves." They took the deal. In the adjacent room, Kyle faced a similar battle. General Vance and the new interim leaders of the coalition stood before him. They held a velvet box containing the insignia of a Grand Admiral. "You are a hero." "Rourke," Vance said. "The public loves you. They want a strong man. Take the command. You can rebuild the fleet in your image." Kyle looked at the stars. They were heavy, gold, and cold. He thought of the Phantom, of the quiet nights in the void, of the way Seraphine looked at him when he made bad coffee. "I do not want the fleet," Kale said. "Kale, be reasonable," Vance urged. "Who else can lead the defense?" "There is no defense," Kale said. "We are at peace." He closed the box and slid it back across the table. "I will take a commission," Kale said, "but not as Admiral. I want to head the Joint Reconstruction Task Force. Give me the engineers, the medics, and the transport ships. I spent 6 years breaking things." "Vance, I want to spend the rest of my life fixing them. The final test came an hour later, on the observation deck overlooking the station's great glass rotunda. Seraphine stood by the window, watching the ships dock. She looked lonely, even with the galaxy at her feet. Kale walked up behind her. He did not touch her, respecting the space, but his presence was a warm weight at her back. They offered you the crown, Kale said. They did, she replied without turning. And I gutted it. I am going to be an empress who answers to minors. It will be a logistical nightmare. They offered me the fleet, Kale said. And I told them I preferred construction work. Seraphine turned then. A smile broke across her face, radiant and relieved. A builder and a reformer. She said, we are going to be very boring. Kale. Boring sounds good, Kale said. Boring means no one is shooting at us. Her smile faded slightly. She stepped closer, searching his eyes. You know what they will say, she whispered. The political analysts, the media. They say we are a liability together, that a Terran peace builder and an Auralith empress is a conflict of interest. They say I should marry a high-born duke to secure the rim. Let them talk, Kale said. He reached out and took her hand. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, rough skin against smooth. We are not going to hide it, Seraphine. And we are not going to let them turn it into a scandal. We define what this is, not them. What is this? She asked softly. Kyle looked at her. He saw the partner who had flown into a sun for him. He saw the woman who had taught him how to forgive himself. It is an alliance, Kyle said. A permanent one. The press conference was broadcast to 400 billion sentient beings. Kale and Seraphine stood at a simple podium. There were no flags behind them, only the open viewport showing the stars. They did not hold hands. They did not kiss. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a unified front. We are not here to declare a victory, Seraphine told the galaxy. Victory implies a loser, and in this war we all lost. We lost time. We lost family. We lost our way. She looked at Kale. He nodded. We are here to declare a beginning, Kale said. The Reconstruction Task Force will begin operations in the Shardline Nebula tomorrow. Auralith and Terran crews will work together to clear the minefields. And regarding the rumors of our personal arrangement, Seraphine added, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Let us be clear. Commander Rourke and I are partners. We are allies, and we are devoted to each other. She paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. This is not a political marriage. It is not a diplomatic hostage exchange. It is a choice. We choose each other. And in doing so, we choose a future where a Terran and an Auralith can stand together without a weapon between them. If you have a problem with that, you can file a complaint with the new Joint Parliament. She looked at the camera with a challenging smirk. But I warn you, the paperwork is excruciating. 6 months later, the Shardline Nebula was no longer a wound. It was a construction site. Huge scaffold ships hung in the void, repairing the orbital habitats. The ion storms were still violent, but the debris was gone. On the bridge of the Phantom, now stripped of its weapons and retrofitted with towing cables. Miller sat with his feet up on the console. Incoming transmission from the Capitol. Miller called out, "It is the boss." Kale, who was welding a support strut in the corner of the bridge, flipped his visor up, put her through. The hologram of Empress Seraphine flickered to life. She was wearing the formal robes of state, but she looked tired. She was rubbing her temples. "Tell me you have good news." Seraphine groaned. "I have been in a budget meeting for 6 hours regarding the grain tariffs on Sector 5. I am ready to abdicate and become a pirate. The grain shipment arrived, Kyle said, wiping grease from his cheek. And the terraforming emitters are online. We should have breathable atmosphere on the moon in 3 months. Seraphine smiled. It was the real smile, the one that made Kale's chest ache. 3 months, she said. I can visit in 3 months. That is the schedule. I will keep the coffee warm, Kale said. How is the crew? She asked. Vance is complaining about the food. Voren is trying to teach the Marines about quantum mechanics. It is chaos. It sounds perfect, she said softly. She looked at someone off-screen, waved them away, and looked back at Kyle. I have to go. Another ambassador is demanding an audience. Kale. Yeah? Don't let Miller fly the crane. I heard that, Miller shouted from the pilot's chair. Kale laughed. I will see you in 3 months. Seraphine. I am counting the days. Wolf actual. The hologram faded. Kale sat there for a moment in the silence of the bridge. He looked out at the nebula. It was beautiful. For the first time in his life, he looked at the stars and didn't see targets. He saw destinations. He picked up his welding torch and went back to work. The lesson he had learned in the fire of the Star Killer finally made sense. Strength wasn't about the capacity to destroy. Strength was the courage to put down the gun when you could have won. Strength was the patience to build a house in a graveyard. And love? Love was not a fairy tale. It was not a magical force that fixed the world. Love was simply the stubborn daily refusal to let the darkness win. It was choosing, over and over again, to be the person who carries the wounded enemy home, even when the war is over, especially when the war is over. Kale lowered his visor. The blue spark of the welder lit up the bridge, a tiny man-made star in the vast, hopeful dark.